If you go to a chat window and ask it a question, if you get an answer back and it's trash, you're never going to ask a question again. You need devs more than you ever have need devs.
Welcome to a special episode of DevQuestions. I'm here with Martin Woodward. Martin, welcome.
Thank you for
joining
having me. Yeah.
So you're the Vice President of Developer Relations
at GitHub. Yeah, that's right.
Excellent.
Yep.
So tell me a bit about what that role entails.
Yeah, mostly deleting a lot of email, I think, when she gets a VP. But so I help developers try and build delightful things. So try and help people understand what GitHub can do for them, and make sure that they, understand the latest and greatest. That's part of the job. That's kind of the advocacy side. I also look after. Sounds silly for GitHub, but I look after the open source community. So making sure, like some of my metrics around open source community health and things like this. So making sure the open source community are happy on GitHub and they're able to be successful, and then advocate for their needs across the product and engineering teams in GitHub. If there's particular areas of interest, if it's hot topics, things like that we need to dig into. I also look after education, and I know this is a topic you want to touch on today, but we have offerings that we give to kind of students and teachers and the whole education community, like the future of developers. So I look after that space, and then things like GitHub sponsors and open source funding, making sure, again, it's related to the health of the open source community, making sure that there's a sustainable way to build open source and try and increase the different ways that people can have feed their families and do open source and help make sure there's a diverse array of options there. So yeah,
there's a lot of conversation about that recently about paying for open source and how that works. So
yeah. So it's people need different funding models for being able to build open source. Some people, I got my job from doing open source. Like that's how I got into this space directly. But I built a company around the open source thing I was providing. And then that company got acquired, and then I worked at Microsoft and then came over to GitHub. But so that's one option, and then another option is different funding models, different ways of doing like support and services kind of thing. And then we also make available a thing called GitHub sponsors, which allows people to kind of do different models. Like, are you going to be almost like a sort of funding voluntary, where you kind of just give money to somebody because you want to support them? Or can we also give those sponsor people the way of being able to tier some benefits for different levels of sponsorship and things like that? And then the last area that we've recently done is around we're trying to making it so that companies can invest in a fund, which then helps give maintainers the time to help secure their projects and come with education and training, as well as the funding to be able to take time to do the education and training.
Okay.
And that's the Secure Open Source Fund. And that was, again, a new thing we did because it's very important, but also, and lots of open source maintainers, including some of the biggest projects, like really wanted that training and education to understand what they can do. But then we also wanted to make sure that there's different pools of money around in companies, and like if you're going to the board and say, I need to secure my dependencies, that's a different conversation to I want to make sure I have good PR, and the secure your open source dependencies is much easier to kind of justify that level of investment that you're making in your dependencies, some of which happen to be open source.
Sure.
So yeah, we're just trying to tackle different ways, again, help provide different funding options, and just try and make sure there's options for people. But people have to find their own way to do things, I think, as well.
Excellent. You touched on it briefly, but can you kind of give us a background of, like, how'd you get here?
Oh, yeah. So I had like a real job for a long time. So I was, I didn't do comp sci. I did a degree in physics. I'm a failed physics teacher.
Okay.
And then, but I was doing lots of programming. I've been programming since I was 6, sort of thing. And then I decided, do I want to go be a physics teacher, or do I sell out to the man and go earn, go into this IT thing, and as a graduate programmer earn more than probably I'll ever earn as a teacher, kind of thing, and opted for that option because I enjoyed programming. I still enjoy teaching people. I enjoy that side, but I enjoyed the coding, So went and did that purely because it was the more lucrative route, if I'm honest, and because I love programming. But yeah,
Sure.
and then did that, had a real job, insurance companies, banks, airlines, that sort of thing, and then did a startup with a few friends around some cross-platform tooling based around Eclipse and Java.
Okay.
So I'd already been involved in open source at that point, but that was kind of where I was really contributing to a major open source. Well, I've done some Apache work, but that's where I contributed to a major open source project. Did that. And then that got acquired by Microsoft in 2009, that company, and then was involved in kind of building like source control. I did a thing called why am I blanking on the name? The Microsoft's old open source hosting area before GitHub came along. I'm blinking on the name. Anyway,
Okay.
I did that.
Okay.
It was like their
It was impactful.
It was hugely impactful. I shut that down as well.
Nice.
So that was when GitHub came along. I did the original partnership with GitHub and kind of was like, okay, this is where the community's coming, rather than us being in our the Microsoft kind of ghetto of open source. Let's make sure we're part of the major community. So then was part of the sort of created the Microsoft GitHub account, helped us change our open source standards and things like this. And then when we acquired, when we did GitHub, I was part of the acquisition team, and then came over after that.
Well, I really appreciated the way you acquired GitHub.
Okay.
Because of the fact that there's a lot of panic, maybe is the right word, in the community about Microsoft and steamrolling over the open source community.
Yeah.
And instead, the first thing you did was some really big wins, like the free private repos, and let's take care of the community and let's move it forward. Let's move some people from Azure DevOps over into do GitHub Actions and really sort of elevate what GitHub can do, rather than what feels like has been the past of Microsoft, which is the let's make it only for us.
Yeah.
And that's been really great to see that GitHub has kind of continued expanding and growing in the community, not just from Microsoft.
And much more so. So I originally did the original paper on should we buy GitHub or not, and that was when we looked at it the first time, it was no, we would break it if we bought it. The good things about GitHub, like the community and all of that, we would risk breaking it by bringing it in. And so how do we then change the business to be a better home for an asset like GitHub, for a community like GitHub? So we actually in 2014 started changing how we worked with open source as a company and rolled out a bunch of open source training, changed how we approached open source, contributing significantly more and becoming one of the major contributors to open source in the business. And then by 2018, when Nat Friedman came along, we were able to take a look again and go, yeah, now's the right time. We can do this, but we did it very much keeping GitHub and deliberately keeping GitHub separate from the rest of Microsoft, and kind of try and use that to infect Microsoft with GitHub rather than,
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
To
try and do it that way, and to protect, there's no point spending $8 billion on something if you're going to then ruin it,
Kill it, yeah.
Yeah, so it was how do we protect the community that's behind it? It's a huge, asset to the world. We cannot, if we messed that up, we'd have lost the trust of developers forever. Trust is built on your actions and proof of actions, and we needed to make sure that was a success, because otherwise we wouldn't be here at Build. Developers would not be interested in GitHub, and by doing things like investing in GitHub, making sure that actions came along, making sure we built a bunch of new features and functionality, investing in VS Code and building up that side as well, then we wouldn't be where we are today. And then on the GitHub side, community growth wise, I love looking at the curve of where the community was at 2018 when we did the acquisition. And then all of a sudden it got up to 65 million and 100 million, and now we're at 150 million people using Git, and that's Oh, okay. So it's still growing exponentially. It's not
Yeah.
That's not stopped. And open source is clearly one as a way to build software. And these are just hugely impactful things that you kind of sit back and step back and go, wow, I actually got to witness that. I was barely like I was a cog in a wheel, as part of the process, but got to witness at that point in history, and what a privilege that is, to be there. It was great.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about GitHub Copilot.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're a fan.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about Copilot, how it came about,
Yeah.
and where it is today.
Well, you say I'm a fan. Originally, so I was like, it was sort of internal research project originally, and we were digging into like chatting with this company called OpenAI, and we're seeing a bunch of like stuff that they were doing, and then we were looking at a model, and then we did like a fine-tuned model. I think it was based on GPT-3, if I remember rightly, but it's kind of slightly fine-tuned to be more coding friendly, and started looking at it. And the research team looking at it, came up with a genius approach. So they were looking at how good the answers were, and what was the like most inexpensive way in terms of user interaction of dealing with it.
Right.
And we went with autocomplete first, because the level of, if you go to a chat window and ask it a question, if you get an answer back and it's trash, you're never going to ask a question again.
Right.
But with autocomplete, you're typing, and then if it gives you something and it's not what you need, you just keep on typing. But then if it gives you an answer back that's good, you're like, oh, that's interesting, and you hit tab, and then you hit tab again, and then before you know it, you're tapping through the file. I was like, there was 5 folks on the team. They'd been working on it, and then they sort of brought me into, hey, we're thinking about like launching this. Like, we should talk. I was like, okay, so get involved, and I was super skeptical. I've been, it's one of those. It's like there's 2 places I've been completely wrong on things. I'll tell you the other one later because that's related to open source. But this was one of them. I was like, yeah, this is AI, whatever. This isn't going to work. And then switched it on, and that like early version, which now looking back, like it's so much better than it is now.
Sure.
It's so much better now than it was then. But that early version, I was like, oh, this is useful. Like, I can code again. I joked about deleting emails. Like, I love to code. Coding I love doing, but like I didn't get time to, and was putting projects off because I knew I know enough about coding to know how much work something was going to be. I was coding again at the weekends and in my spare time, and I was able to, especially the kind of work I do, where I'm oftentimes doing proof of concept applications and building things out. I was like, this is actually pretty good. And then it's just got better and better, in terms of once the answers have got up to a sufficient level where with additional thought, for autocomplete, you have like a 200 millisecond time budget before you need to be able to get an answer back, because otherwise it's pointless.
Right.
You've carried on typing. With chat, that was you get longer to think about it, but then you can create higher quality answers of that because the models have got better. And then with as we go through chat to edits, now agent mode inside of VS Code, you have the ability to have a prompt, and then it take a lot longer to give back answers, but do a lot more because it's got a lot better. And then here at Build, we've kind of taken that to the next level where, if as you're using that and you're doing vibe coding or whatever you want to call it, I hate that term, it makes me cringe, but I don't understand it because I feel that joy when I'm doing it.
Sure.
You're doing agent mode, you kick it off, and quite often you'll kick it off and you'll do something, and it's going to go do like quite a lot of stuff. So you go have a cup of tea, you'll go check another issue, you do whatever. So what we've kind of done is made that asynchronous. So we've made it so you can now do the agentic stuff in a pull request, go have that interaction, have that work in the background for you, and then when it's ready, come back in, look at it, see where we're at, maybe give the agent some more feedback, have it do some more things, either interactively or back in the pull request again. And then when you've got to a place where you're happy, and it passes tests and it does all the good stuff, merge that into your repo and off you go and work on the next one. And that flow of doing it within a pull request and using GitHub issues and things, that actually works really well with how I work, because I can assign it I can look from a backlog, go, you can, once you use the tool, you know what it's good at. It's because it's not a silver bullet, you know what it's good at. You can kind of go, well, this one here, this is pretty, I think it actually do quite a good job of this. So tick, 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 like these 3, I think he's going to do good on. Let's assign those to Copilot. Like this thing on my backlog, I think I need to dig in a bit more before I understand the problem enough to be able to give good direction. So I'm going to go work on that one while these three are, the agent's doing some stuff, Copilot's doing some stuff, and then you go do your thing, you come back, and then you look at it and go, oh, no, that's all done. And so you end up not putting stuff off. So like all of that refactoring or like, a lot of the tech debt stuff that you can kind of put off because you're trying to deliver customer value, you end up like punting it to Copilot, letting it do, see how it does,
sure,
and then go, oh, okay, this doesn't suck. You know what I mean? I'm going to do. Sorry, that's not very good. You can tell I'm not in marketing, but anyway, this is amazing. This is awesome, super awesome. And then to take that, use it, and move on from there. Or you look at it and go, okay, well, that's not quite what I wanted. I'll go do it myself. And so the trick is to do these interactions in a way that help you iterate quicker and don't block your flow. They enhance your flow, and that's kind of been the overall philosophy behind Copilot as we've built it out over the past few years.
Yeah, I like the idea that you're essentially assigning work to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? You're just saying, hey, intern, go do this.
Yeah. And
then doing a review in the pull request and saying, you suck.
Yeah.
Or, hey, that's great. Let's make that work and implement it. I was talking to somebody the other day that their code base was not up to a standard. Like they weren't using Pascal cases in the right places. They were, didn't have the right code comments. They didn't have all these things. They said, well, what if I just used the agent? Just go do that. And, what would be a laborious task that doesn't really add up much value.
It doesn't add any customer value. Yeah.
But at the same time, it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So it's more readable and more usable. It just did it for them, and that was excellent. So.
And the way you do that is there's a file called Copilot instructions, which you can check into your repo. You can have those files at the org level as well. And you can provide your coding standards. So you do things like, use camel case and blah, 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 or, how you want your tabs and spaces to be. Or you can also do things like, hey, when I'm implementing this type of feature in React, like let's wrap it in, maybe using like launch darkly or something like that for feature flags. Let's wrap it in a feature flag condition. And then you just build out these coding standards over time. And the more context you give the model, the more context you give Copilot, the more accurate it can code based on where you want to go, not on what it's seeing in your code base, which explains where you are. And
True.
Quite often you want to point Copilot at where you want your code to be, not where your code currently is. You know what I mean?
You're saying that's a difference sometimes?
Occasionally. Maybe it's just my code.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent. So you're thinking about AI and, Microsoft is, of course, Build was AI.
Yeah.
That was the whole conversation. But we're thinking about AI and how it's moving forward. What do you see as kind of the next steps for Copilot as far as usage? Like an everyday person that's thinking about Copilot, should they be thinking of it as, their interns, they're working for them? Should they be thinking about it as their management and they're letting Copilot do all the work?
All right.
Where do you see that fit in the process?
It's much more, regardless of what level of developer you are, so whether you're a senior dev or a junior dev or whatever, or like somebody who's a hobbyist, treating Copilot like it's your team. So treating, because there are different, while we call it Copilot, there are different agents within that. Like it's agentic. It looks at the conditions, learns, and then automated responses to some stuff. So. So treating it more like a team that you're the tech lead of, or you're the team lead of, and you're kind of controlling direction. AI isn't creative. AI, if you can find a customer that can tell you what your problem is and how to best solve it with a computer, then sure, AI could probably do that. I've never met that customer. They don't know what their problem is,
Sure.
and they certainly don't know what's the most cost-effective, quickest way of solving this with automation, because they don't know what the computers are capable of, what's easy and what's hard. And as a good tech lead knows how to solve a problem in an easy way. And so you need to give that direction to Copilot, and then it can do the stuff for you. And then you can kind of, focus on solving customer problems, like keeping in the flow of where you're at and trying to background task some stuff and then come back to it kind of thing. And just generally, I see it improving that speed of iteration. making sure you're iterating more quickly and getting throughput out of the system more quickly, being able to stay in the flow, not having to jump out to things. So that's kind of where we're going. You talk about like what's next. What's next is actually getting more people learning how to use these tools and things. We've got decent adoption of Copilot. But it's since we did Copilot's now available for free. Certain levels of Copilot available for free, and obviously, adoption's gone through the roof there, which is great. But typically, like when a company rolls out Copilot in an organization, they'll maybe buy 3,000 seats, say, for their entire company or whatever, or 50 or 10 or whatever. But the 25 the adoption of Copilot follows like a Moore's law adoption curve, where you have like 25-30% of people will just grab it and use it because they like the cool hotness. They'll use it, they'll see how it works, they'll do the work to do that because they're early adopters. You then have this kind of the innovation gap, they call it, but you have to cross the chasm. But it's that kind of rollout, and then you've got a late majority and things, and there's ways to get across that chasm inside organizations and help the overall company learn how to use Copilot and work with it well. But developers are busy. They don't want to, you've got a working environment that works. I can solve problems. You're telling me to install a thing that's going to change how I work. Like, I'm busy. I'm not going to do that. And so different people can slot it into different times, and like learning how to do that, I think, is the next big push. And then we've obviously building out like more agentic capabilities. We've added, so now we can do it in the background. How can we now talk to more tools? And that you've heard lots of stuff at Build around MCP support. That's the fundamental building block for enabling more tool calling. How can we add additional agents? So we have a code review agent now as part of Copilot, so it can do your code reviews for you as well as assign it work, that's awesome because I live in the UK. And when I'm doing stuff, people are often asleep. And so being able to give Copilot a first pass before any humans look at my code is fabulous. We also showed some stuff this week around like Java migrations and .NET migrations. If you think about what's holding you back on .NET framework sort of thing and going towards a newer version of .NET, oftentimes it's all of that stuff, the migration work that nobody wants to do and no customer wants to pay for. If we can't build an amazing .NET migration wizard, who can?
Sure.
So we should be able to do that. But we should do the same for Java as well, and we should do for all sorts of different things, like how do we get COBOL code into Python or whatever it is. Those are the areas where I think we get more and more specialized agents that are part of this kind of framework and tools, and then more and more tools plugging in. And that's where I think GitHub's uniquely well positioned to be kind of the hub of these tools, because everybody integrates their stuff into GitHub. And so by using things like MCP, we can do it in an open way as well, which again is very much down to kind of GitHub's core culture and ethos.
That's interesting. I mean, you talk about the idea of GitHub affecting Microsoft. I think it's a big way that they're coming in and saying, hey, let's be open, let's be community focused, rather than just the bad old days of Microsoft was, let's close the gate. I think that's some of the agentic stuff, and the way they tie into things that are nothing to do with C# or Visual Studio or something like that has just been amazing. So let's talk a bit about the usage of models. Models aren't free. And you've got a free version of Copilot. How does that work with paying for an LLM or using a free LLM? How does that work? And is there kind of a stopping point or a pay point or something like that?
So we have a free version, and that's kind of enough. We looked at kind of the usage of average developers and how much we can afford to fund, and kind of strike a balancing point. So that if you're like coding on the weekends, if you're doing like if you're in school, things like this, because we give Copilot for free, Copilot Pro for free to students and teachers as well. But if you're like coding and doing some still stuff, getting to learn, Copilot usage of like the sort of the good models is free for you. Like you shouldn't have to pay, because then. But if you're coding for a job and you're doing it like we don't code for 8 hours a day. We code for like 4 hours a day if it's a good day. But maybe we can go for 8 hours a day with AI. But like if you're doing it for a job, then probably you want to be either getting Copilot Pro, which is like the sort of a paid version, which is gives you more requests, more like it's all based on the number of LLM calls basically, which is how we pay for things in our backend. We're a consumer of Azure AI, just like any other person out in the conference hall. Quite a big one, but we're and obviously Claude Sonnet and Google. I'm blanking again.
Gemini.
The Gemini models. Like we're just consumers of those models, kind of thing, and then we have a bunch of infrastructure below them and over them, which we can dig into if you're interested. But those we're just consumers of those models. We pass them on, but we've got obviously a set budget where we're handling all the free stuff. And then we pay for Pro. That gives you more requests and it gives you access to more models because different models have different price points. And then finally, we have and then we also have business for enterprises to go into, and then the final level is like Pro Plus and Enterprise, and that's where you get a lot more requests and you get access to a lot more models, including some of the really expensive ones like O1 or something like this, which have like advanced reasoning capabilities but are significantly slower and more expensive. And so you use them when you are stuck. You don't use them for the definitely don't use them for autocompletes. Like you can't even enable it for that. But you use them for when I need reasoning to help me solve a problem. Otherwise, GPT-4.1 is a fabulous model, and that's now like the default model kind of thing. Or you can use Claude Sonnet, and then different people have different preferences between 3.5 and 3.7. What was really interesting when we started, and this is the biggest difference, there was clearly a model that could do this better than anything else on the market. And then the advancements in LLMs, like new models coming out all the time, and we're keeping up with all that and making sure we bring those to developers. We've moved to a world now where it's all about giving the developer the choice of which LLM they want to use, because the LLMs are just advancing so quickly. It's starting to get to the point where no one is clearly better, but they have different, not personalities, because I don't want to anthropomorphize, but they have different ways they work.
Sure.
Like sort of GPT-4.0 was quite verbose in its answers. GPT-4.1 is a little bit less verbose. Claude 3.5 does really nice terse C# code and will use like lovely link statements usually. 3.7 is good, but in agent mode, I love 3.7 personally, Claude 3.7, but in agent mode. But for some people, they find it's they almost say it's like too assertive in things it wants to touch.
Interesting.
And so they would prefer to use, say, Claude 3.5 in agent mode, but use GPT-4.1 in ask mode. And like people have different preferences, and we need to give developers those controls to be able to do that. I would love to give an auto mode. The auto mode for us right now is go use GPT-4.1. That's like what we call base. That's the base model. Go use that because it's good for most things. But it would be great to have an auto mode where we're inferring a lot more. But right now, the advancements in LLMs are so fast, it's easier to give you the stick shift and then you decide rather than us build a rule in which then changes tomorrow or the day after. Like literally this week, that's what's happening as new announcements are coming out and things.
Sure. Yeah, and it's an interesting analogy, that stick shift, because I grew up with a stick shift. Dad taught me on a stick shift. It was awesome. But now we have automatics throughout the country. It's easy. Because of the fact that we've learned a lot, and it's easy to put automatic in a car. And I think that's where we're getting to, is eventually we'll have that automatic capability of, hey, we know what's best for you. Let's help you out within auto mode.
Yeah.
But for now, we're still in the early phases of, like you said, the models continually change.
Yeah. But the internal combustion engine hasn't changed that much, and then we've had the introduction of like hybrids and electric motors and things. But even those, they haven't changed that much. LLM advancements are it's incredible how fast things are moving. Like, so much so that it's usually better. We've done experiments with customers. We've done lots of stuff. Like we have fine-tuned models of things for like, say, different like semiconductor companies or like the Office team, because their C++ code has so many templates and stuff. It almost resembles a completely different language. So we did a fine-tuned model for them and got a much greater like code acceptance, which is a thing that we tend to track. But the interesting thing is that the next model comes out and actually its acceptance is better than the fine-tuned version of this.
Interesting.
And so then it becomes, okay, maybe we should focus on improving the speed of delivery of new models to people, so then you get those enhanced capabilities, and improving our ability to do retrieval, RAG, so improving our ability to give that model the context it needs to give you the better answers. Focus on those things, because then you're going to get better results rather than focusing on making yesterday's LLM really well suited to you, if you know what I mean.
So, yeah, and I think that I've seen with the agent mode, I love agent mode.
Oh, right, yeah.
Love it.
Right.
And I love the fact that, yes, models are smart.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great models, but it's more about the fact that it looks at my code.
Yeah.
And says, okay, here's the context.
Yeah.
Because that context is so huge.
Yeah.
I don't do things the same way the next developer does. Let's get that context in place that it can make an informed decision rather than an in-the-dark decision. So let's talk a bit about vibe coding.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been, this thing has grown over time of, hey, I can do everything with an LLM. What are your thoughts on vibe coding and where we're at with that?
The term exists because using agent mode is joyful. And you can do a ridiculous amount really, really quickly. By looking at what's coming out of the result and passing in requirements, viewing what was done, and judging it based on this. You know what I mean? So it's almost, rather than being the tech lead, you're now the business stakeholder in terms of how you're working with your team. So I get it. I do have the people who are most effective at using these AI tools are the people with the best DevOps guardrails. It's maybe an old-fashioned thing to think, but because that then helps you accelerate your delivery safely. You need you need to be checkpointing regularly. You need to be able to, because you might have a working version, go tell the agent another thing, and all of a sudden it's trashed what you've got. And if you didn't, if you weren't testing that particular area, then you don't notice, and then you've got way far down, and then you realize you broke something. So all of that good hygiene that we got used to doing, we need to be doing still. So you need to be committing regularly. If you've got tests and things, they help the agent get better because it can run your tests for you to make sure it hasn't broken stuff. So vibe coding I love, and I do a lot of it in my spare time. How we can take those productivity improvements and apply them into work is, I think, where we're doing things like agent, the agentic stuff where you can assign it to a PR, because now you can do vibe coding, but within a PR with commits, with checkpoints, with CI on the back end, with the ability to review and have peer review of your team. That's where I see things kind of going. But yeah, I enjoy it, so I get why it's there, but equally it makes me cringe when people are like, oh, just YOLO everything, you know what I mean? And you get the classic, I've deployed my website, here's my address, localhost sort of thing. You need to still understand what it's doing, and that, you need devs more than you ever have need devs to that you make sure that actually what we're doing is the right thing to do.
Right, being that informed manager.
Code. Of agents.
Right.
And being able to give it the creative direction and the ability to solve, we've seen different solutions to solve the same problem, and some work and some don't, and it's how do you get that crisp minimum amount of work to solve a problem solution to something that's the most flexible? That's where the creativity comes, and that's what, as developers and as you rise in seniority, that's what you're learning, is how to solve problems, how to do less work and solve the problems. Not how do I be a 100x developer or something. A senior engineer writes less code than a junior engineer.
Absolutely.
And it's not because they're solving less customer problems, they just know how to solve more customer problems by writing less code.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the idea that it's the guardrails you put in place, it's really important. It's even more important to have good testing. It's even more important to have a good CI system. It's even more important to have those processes in place, code reviews, where you're looking at what's happening and managing it well.
Yeah.
So making informed decisions about, is this good code? Is this the right code? Is it secure code? Is it, instrumented code? All that good stuff is still very important. But but I do think it moves us forward a lot faster.
Oh, yeah, and then you also, it's not just in the dev in a loop, it's in the deployment in a loop as well, and making sure you can get it out into production quickly and easily. Like, do you have, ephemeral production environments? Are you able to deploy like to environments with no environment drift? Are you able to learn from what's happening in production and then use that to give you feedback of where you started? That's where we're seeing people who are more advanced there are leveraging AI tools a lot better. If you, I did some pithy statement that vibe coding without doing that is a bit like doing test-driven development without the tests. You're just iterating, you're just pushing stuff out there, but you don't know if you're going in a good way or not. And so I think this is like responsible vibe coding or ethical vibe coding or something like that. I'll try and coin a phrase that definitely won't catch on. There is one we're talking about with agentic DevOps, being able to use these agents in a DevOps way, because maybe what we can do with things like what's stopping you from having good DevOps principles today, maybe it's like your tech debt. So if we can build agents to help you skip a line in terms of, what's stopping me from going to the cloud is I'm on a really old version of Java and none of the cloud providers support it. Well, let's help you upgrade your Java version. And then now you can get to the cloud and now you can be a bit more cloud native. And, so maybe we can help accelerate the people who are not as mature in DevOps to get there. But the people who are more mature in DevOps, man, they can just go so much faster now.
Excellent. And they can write YAML, so that's a huge bonus for me.
Yeah, it really can. And when you are writing YAML, the tick is there as well in your prompt to give it an example of the YAML that you want to write. One of the tricky things I found as well is sometimes I'll want it to generate a snippet of YAML for me, but it will indent the YAML back as if it's at the root because it's trying to build a fully constructed correct YAML file. And if you're generating a subsection of it, it's like, no, put the 4 spaces on the front or whatever.
That's a big deal in
YAML.
Yeah,
it really is. But that's where you have to give it the whole context. You know what I mean? But yeah.
But yeah, excellent.
Cool.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Before we go, you've been in development for a long time. And of course, now you're at GitHub. Do you have any advice for newer developers getting in the field? What are your thoughts that you can share? What are your wisdom?
Yeah, I've got skin in the game here. I've got a kid who's like 21. He's in his 3rd year of a 4-year master's doing computer science. And trying to sort of see how we're helping this new generation learn how to use these tools to be effective. The AI tools are undoubtedly make you quicker at developing, so we need to make sure we help them learn how to use them and get advantage of them, and when not to use them, when to switch them off because you need to learn or something like that. So my advice for developers is to learn these tools, learn how they can be a part of your workflow, and learn when it makes sense to use them. Don't be, and this is for people coming into the industry as well as existing developers, don't be dismissive of them. And then for new developers coming in, it's focus on what the customer pain points, like focus on how do I solve this problem, focus on learning the different technology stacks and what they're capable of, so that you're more of like a solutions architect or a lead dev when you're coming in as a junior dev. You are helping your AI tools and your AI agents build the right answer for that solution. And that might well be build me a static website that does some stuff rather than build like a massive end-to-end application with like Redis and blah, blah, blah and all this, So again, that's where a senior developer has experience over a junior developer is what's the simplest way to solve this problem. And you still need that with AI because otherwise you risk the AI helping you go really quickly in the wrong direction. So so it's not very short, pithy advice, but no,
excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, thanks for being here. And as always, I am Tim Corey.